that will be under him. And because the prophets of the Bible saw empires forming in the last days and world leaders over them, many people want to know about America. They say, we don't live in Europe and we don't live in Canada nor Latin America, we live in America. So what are the patterns for the United States? What does God say to us as citizens of America, the greatest Gentile nation, I think, on the face of the earth, and yes, still a leading Christian nation among the nations of the earth? So many people have questions. So I want to say again, before we get started, that this is not a political message. Anytime you mention a White House, a Capitol, a Senate, House, Congress, a president, a leader, people think it's a political message. I do not get involved with politics, but as a prophetic preacher, I have to deal with empires, nations, and people. So please understand that even in the title of this message, that's what we're dealing with today. There are three monotheistic religions. That word monotheistic simply means they believe there is one God. Those religions all have predictions for the future. They are the religion of the devout Jews called Judaism, the religion of Islam, the Muslims, and the religion of Christianity. The Christians believe, if you are a devout Christian, there are 66 books in the Bible. They are inspired of the Holy Spirit, and they are filled with future predictions called prophecies. The Jews believe, if they are devout Jews, in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, the prophets, and what is called the wisdom literature or the writings. Many Orthodox Jews, of course, would never accept the New Testament. Many devout Jews would never accept the New Testament, but they do accept what we would consider to be much of the Old Testament. Now, in Islam, they believe in what's called the Quran. The Quran was not written by Muhammad, their founder. It was written by people after Muhammad that had written down his words and his sayings, perhaps on a leaf, a parchment, or a piece of bone. Then it was compiled together in what was called the Quran. The Quran, however, does talk about the 4 Gospels. It talks about the Torah. It talks about the Psalms. The difference is that Muslims believe that Jews and Christians altered the Bible. In other words, they teach Ishmael was offered by Abraham, not on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem necessarily, but at the Kaaba, the Black Stone in Saudi Arabia. They have altered certain things. Abraham goes through a fiery furnace. And of course, when you really study Islam out in detail, you will discover that there were numerous stories in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th century that Muhammad apparently heard people talk about that were kind of mixed up and incorporated in some of his stories. Now, when you ask a Muslim, that's not what history or the Bible says. What they will say is Jews and Christians changed history and changed the Bible. The Quran has the actual fact. So it's a little difficult to witness to them based on just their book versus the other scriptures. Now, having said that, all 3 of these religions trace their roots to Abraham. All 3 believe in the Torah and the prophets, although, again, Muslims believe Jews and Christians have changed portions of the Bible. All 3 believe in the last days and believe there are certain signs that accompany the last days. All 3 of these religions believe there's one person that is a Savior-type person. To the Jews, he's called Mashiach or Messiah. To the Christians, he would be Christ, Jesus, our Lord. To Islam, it begins with a man called the Mahdi. You've heard me talk about that, the awaited one. All 3 of these religions believe that Jerusalem is the key and that their leader or their Messiah will one day bring forth a kingdom in the Middle East, specifically in the area of Jerusalem, and will unite people around that particular belief. So to the Christians, we say Christ is coming back and the world will be united around him. To the Muslims, it will be the Mahdi, Isa, which is Jesus, and Muhammad, but Jesus will convert the world to Islam. So in other words, it's interesting, they all 3 wife showing public affection. There was a couple that kissed each other in one of the Gulf states and actually were put in jail, and they were not from that country. They happened to be visitors visiting that nation. That gives you an idea. So Islamic justice simply means Islamic law will rule. Number 3, Muslims believe that this rule is initiated by the arrival of the awaited one called the Mahdi. The Mahdi is a person. The Sunnis and Shias both believe in him and that he will appear, but they have vast differences of opinion about who he is and where he comes from and where his rule initiates, although both of them believe he rises out of the country of Iraq. The Mahdi appears at the end of days, and he assists in the conversion of the world to Islam. He will unite the Islamic nations according to their belief, and they will form what is called a new caliph, or a new Islamic empire. The Turkish Empire once ruled in 27 provinces and 3 continents. The Ottoman Turks, 1517 to 1917. And when they lost that control, Islam has never totally regained to that level. They are looking to regain at that level of a brand new empire in the very near future. Number 4, Jesus will, this is their belief, Jesus will appear. His name is Isa again in the Quran. He will kill the swine, destroy the cross, and deny that he was the Son of God. See, Muslims do not believe that Jesus was crucified, and they do not believe he was raised from the dead. They believe before the crucifixion that God changed the countenance of one of the disciples to look like Jesus. And so when that man was on the cross that everybody said was Jesus, it wasn't Jesus, that God caught Jesus alive into heaven and rebuked him for saying, "You are my son because I have no son." So in the end of days, God will look at Jesus and say, "Now it is time for you to go back to earth and tell everybody, I have no son." I'm of the opinion that the false prophet of Revelation chapter 13 verse 11 that builds an image that speaks and lives, that helps initiate the mark of the beast, that causes all people to worship that image, will be the Isa of Islam. That he will be the person that they accept as Isa or Jesus, but someone said, well, how will they accept him when there's no crucifixion marks in Jesus' hand? Because they don't need crucifixion marks. There would be no crucifixion marks on the Islamic Jesus. That's how we'll know when the real Jesus comes, because if you read the Old Testament, the prophet said, they will say to him, "Where did you get those wounds?" And he will say, "I got them in the house of my friends." That's how we'll know when the real Jesus comes. Now, the other part of this, which is interesting, is Islam does believe that in the last days there's a Dajjal coming. And the Dajjal is a type of antichrist. In fact, they have a teaching of 2 men that are Dajjals. And they will appear in Israel for a period of time and deceive people. But their Mahdi will come and kill those 2 men. Now, if you know anything about the Bible, there are 2 Jewish witnesses that come. We believe one is Enoch, one is Elijah. Some say Moses and Elijah. And in Revelation chapter 11, the 2 witnesses will come. 42 months they'll preach, and they will be killed by the beast that rises up out of the pit. So once again, Islam is actually teaching things that many of them I know have no idea, that are alluded to in the Bible, but not in the way they're teaching it. It's like God knew through John to reveal to John what was going to happen. And I think those 2 witnesses will be 2 witnesses to the Jews, but will be 2 Dajjals to the Muslims. And so when the Antichrist kills them and raises up as the final Mahdi, they will accept him even easier after the death of these 2 men. Now, having said that, number 5, Islam will eventually rule the United States of America. There's a plan called the 100-year plan that started in the year 2000, and it goes for the next 100 years to the year 2100. Now, we are now, at the time of this message, in the year 2010. But let me just share with you some things that are happening that really are troubling in line with this thought. The city of Detroit. The city of Detroit, in Detroit, Michigan, is one of the hardest hit unemployment cities in the United States. The economy is in shambles. 30% are unemployed, and 50%, and some say it's as high as 50%. There are others that say those that have quit seeking jobs, maybe 50%. Houses, businesses, and buildings are closed. Now, what has happened in Detroit is very interesting, and I asked if this was true, and I had a friend from Northern Ohio say it really is true, that the city is allowing individuals to buy these dilapidated homes for $1. All you do is give the city $1, and then you pay taxes and the property tax, which is what the city needs, and you can get the home. The thing is, the Muslims are buying the homes up by the hundreds and the hundreds and the hundreds, meaning when the economy recovers, they'll have whole entire neighborhoods that are entirely Muslim neighborhoods. Dearborn, Michigan is an Islamic city. It's mostly Arab. There are Arab Christians, by the way, that live there, but it is just about being taken over by the Islamic religion. So Michigan is one of those states. Someone said, why? Because Michigan borders Canada. There's a whole connection here to why Michigan would be one of the cities. And number two, in the car industry years ago, a lot of the people from the Middle East moved to work in the car industry. So there's several reasons why it has been that way. So one of the things that is interesting as we relate to Islam controlling America one day, or ruling it, or having a president and a House and Senate that is Islamic, has to do with the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam is it's actually the African American or the black organization headed up by Louis Farrakhan, and there are thousands and thousands of men, African American men, who are involved in the Nation of Islam who consider themselves to be Muslim. When and I think I can go ahead and share this now, but when Michael Jackson thought that he would go to prison, there was a meeting that he had, and Louis Farrakhan sent him a message. He said, Michael, if you will convert to Islam and make it known, we own the prisons in America. And I will ensure to you that you will never be raped by anybody, because your Muslim brothers will protect you and defend you in prison. And I thought it was interesting that he said, we own the prisons, because I do a lot of work with prisoners, and they will tell you that Islam among the black men in the prison is very, very high. A lot of them are Christians, and they go in and they convert to Islam because of protection or the brotherhood. Let me just tell you one reason a prisoner told me. He said, they teach us in prison that there will be a Muslim president one day, and anybody that's a Muslim in prison will be released when the president releases all Muslims out of jail. And he said that's another reason. He said the second reason is we can have up to 5 wives, meaning we can fornicate with whoever we want to. Come on, I'm preaching now. So that, I think, inspires some of these individuals to go the way they do. Islamic prophecies. Now, let's talk about this for a moment. We're going to share something with you. Islamic prophecies come from two main sources, the Quran and what is called the Hadith. The Hadith is the sayings of Muhammad that people heard him say. It reads like this: and I heard the prophet, blessed be his memory, say this. I saw the prophet, blessed be his memory, do that. That's the Hadith. The Quran is where Muhammad would say, and the angel appeared to me and said this, or he wrote directly something or said something directly. Both of these contain prophecies. A third source, which is not recognized among Sunnis, but can be recognized among Shia Muslims, is sermons that had been preached hundreds of years ago that have predictions in them. Please keep that in mind. Now, what is interesting is the Islamic prophecies often deal with war in the last days, war involving Iraq, war involving the Persians, war involving Syria, war involving the West, which I think is extremely interesting. Now, let me share with you a hadith. One of the hadiths reads like this. We were sitting in the company of Jabir bin Abdullah when he said, quote, soon the people of Iraq will have neither any food, grain, nor any money. We asked, why would such a thing happen? He replied, because of the non-Arabs, meaning they will prevent food from going into Iraq in the form of sanctions. And this is an interpretation of this. Soon the people of Sha'am, Syria, will neither receive any money or grain. We asked why this would happen. He said, because of Romans. He said, because of the Romans, which in the Quran, or the Hadith, I should say the Hadith, the Romans are Christians. Anytime you hear the word Romans mentioned, it's not Roman Empire, because the Roman Empire, by the time Muhammad came, had already deteriorated. It means Christians. And it would mean Roman Catholic / in other words, that's why the word Roman is being used. All right, the Hadiths are, the Hadiths and these messages or sermons we mentioned can be a part of the Shia branch of Islam. In other words, what I want to look at here is some Shia predictions and some Shia prophecies. And remember, Ahmadinejad, that's the branch that he is from. Keep that in mind. Iran, in fact, is about 97 to 98% Shia Muslim. And by the way, the Sunnis and the Shias have not really got along all the way back in the time after the death of Muhammad. They've actually been fighting off and on pretty steady for that entire time. Now, the first thing I want to share with you has to do with the Islamic calendar. Not our calendar, not a Jewish calendar, but the Islamic calendar. So this is where the story begins. The Islamic calendar has 12 months and 7 days a week, with Ramadan being the most sacred month. This is the month, they believe, when Gabriel brought the Quran and the teachings in the Quran to Muhammad. It operates on a 354 or a 355 days being a year, and it is a lunar calendar and not the solid solar calendar that what we call the Gregorian calendar that we use, which is 365 days a year. They celebrate 16 holy days on their calendar in the entire year. The calendar, now this is important, you can't miss this. The calendar began in 622 AD. The Christian calendar starts at 0, and you've got what's called BC, before Christ, you got AD, and we know that actually the simplest way of saying is after Christ. Anytime you see AD, you mean it's after the birth of Christ. That's how we operate our Gregorian calendar. However, the Muslims start with the Hajj, or they start with an important event in Muhammad's life in 622 AD. So 623 is the year 1. 624 is the year 2. 625 is the year 3. You see what I'm saying? So that means that the year 2010 is the year 1431 on the Islamic calendar. Does everybody understand that? Because now we go into some prophecies. Now, there were beliefs handed down in these hadiths, and I want to give you 3 of them that are interesting. Number 1, every 100 years, a person will come to renew faith in the hearts of Muslims. Number 2, there will be major renovations that will occur in the second 1,000 years. Now, this was predicted in the 14th century. And so the second 1,000 years, if you go at 622, you got to go to 1622 to make it 1,000 years. So they're saying in that second half, there'll be many renovations that will take place. Number 3, now this is the part we're going to get into. There were predictions for the year 1400 on the Islamic calendar. And 1400 in our calendar is 1979. Now I want you to hold that thought for just a moment. There was a man by the name of Bed Uzimin, and I had Charlie call our friend in Israel, Joseph. A lot of you know him. Joseph's background is Muslim, and we began to ask Joseph, did he know about this man? He says everybody knows about the message he gave in a Damascus mosque to 10,000 Muslims in the year 1327. And he said that his name means something like not now, but coming in the future. So this man gave a speech that was written down and recorded that has been handed down, and Joseph told me the Shiites don't think much about it because we don't like predicting things as much as the Sunnis don't as much as the Shias. So the Shias really look to this guy, and it's important you understand that. And what nation did I tell you was strong in the Shia religion? Come on, talk to me, somebody. Iran. Okay, Ahmadinejad, where he's ruling from. Now, it is interesting that there are writings in the Hadith and also messages that were preached that the Mahdi would come after 1,400 years of the blessed period. Those who knew Muhammad even gave predictions about the 1400th year of Islam. Their calendar began in 622 AD, and this would mean they expected big things for 1979 to 1980. See, some of you have no idea where I'm about to go with this, but I do. So Muslims for years, hundreds of years, kept their eye on what would be the 1400th year, or on our calendar would be the year 1979. In an address, a sermon in Damascus, in the mosque in 1371, it was predicted that the Mahdi would silence unbelievers using science and civilization, and Islam would suddenly become superior to all other religions in the year 1421, which happens to be the year 2001 on our calendar. Maybe you've not put this together yet, but there was a man by the name of bin Laden, Osama bin Laden, who was living in a cave, who was hiding in a cave. Oddly enough, one of the teachings of the Mahdi is hiding in a cave. And you can't touch him or kill him because he's protected by God, by Allah. And Muhammad predicted the Mahdi, and the Hadith predicts the Mahdi appearing, and all of a sudden, one of their teachings from this 1371 message is, look out for the year 1421, because when 1421 comes, the Mahdi will begin to appear. How odd that in 2001, bin Laden, who declared himself to his followers secretly as the Mahdi, decides to attack the West on September the 11th, 2001, bringing down the Twin Towers, attacking the Pentagon, and causing a war in terror, you hear me, that the West is still involved in. Why did they pick that year? Why did they say this is the year? I'm telling you, because those who believe in apocalyptic Islam, including this man Ahmadinejad, believe that they play a role in helping to fulfill prophecy. Interestingly enough, in 1371, Bed-Uzzaman predicted, quote, the sun will begin to rise at that time. He likened the sun to the rising of the prevalence of Islam's moral values to the world. There will be an initial redness of the sun in 1421, 2001, followed by a second enlightenment, and it would happen according to their calendar at the beginning of these years, 1981 through 1991. Now remember, the World Trade Center was then attacked in 1993 by a blind sheik and his followers. Here is a quote. During the worst period of the strife in the end times, Allah will no doubt send an individual of great light as the greatest mujtahid, quote, this is in parentheses, an Islamic scholar and leader who can bring in a verdict from verses of the Quran and Hadith when needed. A judge and a Mahdi. He will raise up leaders who will protect Islam at this time. The sun and light are themes that developed concerning the last day leaders who will rise in Islam. Please understand that. Don't miss that point. This man in 1327 taught that in 1400 years, or the 1400th year on the Islamic calendar, that there would be leaders that would rise, including the soon appearance of the Mahdi. I call it the theory of self-fulfilling prophecies. Now, what many of you have not put together yet, and I didn't expect you to, is what happened in the Islamic world on the 1400th year, which is 1979 and 1980. Shall we take a look at what happened those years? Number one, in 1979, there was a prediction there would be 4 peace treaties, and one would be made with the sons of Aaron, which were the Jews. The 4th one would be made between Egypt and Israel, and ladies and gentlemen, that was made in 1979. Why did Egypt make peace with Israel in 1979? Because there was a prediction that it would happen hundreds of years before, perhaps. The Islamic Revolution took place in Iran. The Shah was disposed, and the fanatics took over, and a man by the name of Ayatollah Khomeini, who again tried to poise himself as the expected Mahdi, came to power in 1979, the 1400th year on the Islamic calendar. In 1979, there was a battle in Mecca. At the Hajj that took place. There was a massacre at the Kaaba. It was the first day of the Islamic year 1400. 30 were killed. Do you know why that happened? I wrote about it in one of my books. A man stood up in Arabia and declared himself to be the Mahdi that they were expecting in the first day of the year 1400 in 1979. In 1980, wow, Iran and Iraq went to war. The Sunnis and the Shiites began to fight. Saddam Hussein began to fight the Ayatollah Khomeini's people in a battle for the control of a refinery island that sits between the two countries. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, why would there be a battle in 1980? Because of predictions which are handed down, there would be a war in Iraq. Is anybody listening to what I'm saying? 1981. Oh, it was predicted in these sermons. The king of Egypt will be killed somewhere following 1400. In 1981, the Islamic Brotherhood assassinated in a parade Anwar Sadat, who had made the 4th treaty, the treaty between Egypt and the Jews. Oh, I hope you're hearing me. Now, the point I wish to make is this. Why suddenly, and you can trace it back, you study it, why suddenly in 1979 in the country of Iran, the Shia Muslim, why did the Muslims have an overthrow? Why did the fanatics take power? Why did those who believe the strongest in the Mahdi come to authority and have remained in authority to this day? Because I'm telling you, they are basing what they are doing on what I call Islamic apocalyptic prophecies. This is something the West does not understand. We understand our Bible prophecies, and we look at it this way. Well, the Lord's going to do it when He wants to do it. Jesus will come back when He's ready to come back. Sure, Israel was a nation. Hallelujah. That's a fulfillment of prophecy. But these individuals, some of them, including Ahmadinejad, has believed he must do certain things in order to make the predictions come to pass and be a part of Islamic history in introducing the final man. Oh, here's another prophecy they had. Quote, before the hour comes. That means the hour, the very last days, there will be a dusty and smoky tribulation like patches of dark light. When the towers fell, and I went back to Israel, and that smoke was stirring. This is what they told me. Muslims said, we grew up as kids hearing that when you see big buildings fall, and when you see smoke and dust, it is a sign of the last days. They predicted this in their prophecies. Quote, the people of Iraq will be divided into 3 groups. One part will join the looters. One group will flee and their families be left behind, and another group will fight and kill. Prepare yourself for doomsday when you see this. This is not a recent prediction. We're going back hundreds of years. Guess what? The United States government, this actually happened under Bush 1. Herbert Walker Bush. When they were going in there was a plan to divide Baghdad in half. It was called Desert Sword. And they were going to put 3 divisions. The Shias to the south, Sunnis in the middle, and Kurds to the north. That plan has still been discussed on the drawing board because there are 3 different ethnic ideas, ethnic beliefs, prophetic beliefs, and they figure if you put them all in their little groups, they'll all get along a lot better. Hey, folks, do you understand that this is what happened? There was a group of looters, there was a group of people fleeing, and there was a group, oh, by the way, headed up by Muqtada al-Sadr, the head of the Mahdi army, that fought the U.S. troops, put explosives out, tried to kill as many as they could to run the U.S. troops out. So what I'm saying is, as we go to war, you have another man connected to the Shia religion with his black turban on. By the way, that's in Islamic prophecy too. And he is telling people we must rise up. Why do you tell people to rise up? Because they know their teachings. They are taught these things from a child. Listen, you don't teach your kid half the Bible that the Muslims teach their kids, the Quran and the Hadith. They're 7- and 8-year-old kids. You listen to me, they can quote the entire Quran because they get that word inside of them, because that's how strong they believe. By the way, the latest prediction is the economic crisis will end in 2014. Wonder why? Let me tell you how Islam's going to take over the world one day prophetically. Let me tell you how the Antichrist will be linked to that religion, and let me tell you why it will work. It's one word. It's called interest. They call it something else. We call it in the Bible interest. Interest has killed us. We print money in the United States with the Federal Reserve, and we owe them $2 trillion in interest. What a scam and a sham. But did you know in the Islamic religion, you cannot charge a fellow Muslim interest rates. If you're going to help build him a house, he has to give you a collateral if it fails, but you can't charge him 1%, 2 or 3. How many people in Europe do you think would be willing to sell their soul or convert from what they are to survive economically when you've got one system that says 7.5% and another system that has trillions of dollars in oil money that says you come with us, no interest? I'm going to tell you, I know people, I know politicians in Washington that would sell their mama out. I'm serious. This is what I believe is possible, how some of these things could happen. Now, the year 2008, is everybody hearing this now? I want to make sure. Are you with me? Raise your hand. All right, that's everyone. The year 2008 to 2011 is significant because 2011 we're 2010, 2011 is the year 1431 on the Islamic calendar. Why is that interesting? Because there was a prediction made that there would be a year of victory of moral values and a year of the Quran that adds up to our year 2008. It was predicted that in 30 to 40 years after the year 1981, now and again, I'm using their number on their calendar and translating it to our year, so to make it simple, a world leader would come. This would be, again, on our calendar between the year 2001 to 2011. This new leader would help unite Islam, form an Islamic union, help introduce the Mahdi, and would be called the Uniter. Y'all know where I'm going? Now, all of these predictions I just named about the year 1400, a king dying, this happening, they can be self-fulfilling, because actually if you predict the king can die, somebody can go take the king out, which we understand happened with a man that was a peacemaker by the name of Anwar Sadat. However, the question I want to ask is this: how do Muslims view the 44th President of the United States? How do they view him? How do they look at him? What are they saying behind the scenes about him? And is there a significance to President Obama's background of how he would view the Middle East? Would he, for example, be so pro-Islamic that he would not be pro-Israel? Would he somehow favor Islamic nations above the Jewish state because of his raising, his background, and the people that he associated with? Let's take a journey. This is all public knowledge. President Obama's family, first, his father was a Muslim from Kenya named Barack Hussein Obama Sr., who died in 1982. His stepfather was a Muslim by the name of Lolo Soterio, and I don't have the year that he died, but he passed away. Number three, his grandfather was a Muslim, Hussein Onyango Obama. He died in 1979. Interesting. Obama's name was Barry Soetoro, and he changed his name to Barack Hussein Obama after his father's name when he was in college. He attended school in Indonesia as a child, which is the largest Islamic nation in the world. He spent several years and did studies in the Quran, according even to his book, Dreams of My Fathers. His parental step-grandmother is a Muslim, Sarah Hussein Obama. His brother Roy chose Islam over Christianity, and in the book he talks about how proud he was of Roy. In 1992, Roy was married. Roy had studied after Malcolm X. He is linked to the Black Nation of Islam and now lives in Chicago. As Obama said in his own speeches, by his own words, most of his family is Muslim. Now, having said that, the strong Islamic connections. There is a fellow student who knew Obama when he was called Barry in Indonesia attending school. In 2007, a classmate named Ronnie Amaris, now a bank manager in Jakarta, Indonesia, Ronnie had a picture taken with the young Obama, and he said that Barry, that's how we knew him then, was a devout Muslim. And they played together. Obama prayed in the neighbor's prayer room wearing a sarong. That's a special prayer robe, Islamic prayer robe. Ronnie said Obama at one point had to change his religion if he ever intended later to run for the office of President of the United States, because Americans would never elect a Muslim to be President of the United States. Now, that's a friend of his talking who knew him as a young boy in school. The Indonesian school he attended is Francis Assisi. He was number 205, named Barry Soetoro. Of course, it had his father's step name on the paper. In fact, his stepfather was a citizen of Indonesia and registered on the paper, and this is the parents doing this. Please understand this. I'm not going to make any issue out of this, but he was registered as a Muslim when he entered the school. that's interesting because that's a Catholic school. And in Bethlehem, Israel, there are Muslims and Catholics that go to the same school, or Christians and Muslims that go to the same school. But they allow them to register as either a Muslim or a Christian. So in other words, if his family, in fact, he even wrote one time about his family being religious and so on, but yet there's no indication of that, they did register him under an Islamic name. Now, that's one thing, but it gets deeper when you get to the college records. Let me look at some of the close friends of Obama. College at Occidental. He had a freshman roommate named Ahmed Hussein from Pakistan, who's now a Boston banker. He had another friend as a freshman, Wahid Hamid, who was from a wealthy Pakistani family. By the way, both of these men were Muslim. They traveled together to Pakistan after graduation and stayed for a period of time with Muhammad Hassan Khandu, who is now his family, I should say, the family of this man. And this man, Muhammad Hassan, is now the vice president of PepsiCo in New York City. In other words, he was close friends and roommates with several Pakistanis whose families were very, very, very wealthy Muslims. He also had a friend by the name of Sohail Siddiqui from Pakistan. In Dreams of My Fathers, Obama wrote that Siddiqui smoked marijuana, snorted cocaine, and liked to party. He was Obama's roommate at Columbia University. Now, but Siddiqui was not a student at the time, and they think he lived off campus. In fact, you can't even hardly get information on this because everything's been locked up. During the campaign, two of these men helped raise $100,000 and $200,000 among their Muslim contacts. It didn't make news, but I know this as a truth, that he was receiving $25 overseas from the Gaza Strip that was being funneled into a company in America and through individuals who were giving it. So there was a real question. I talked to someone who was an insider to one of the campaigns who said it really is true. There's unaccounted for money coming outside, which, how many of you know that's illegal? No presidential campaign can take outside money. And I know probably they've all done it at some point, to be honest with you, and it didn't get caught. Or they wiggled around it somehow. I hope that didn't happen, but who knows. But anyway, this is some of the information that came out. Number two, please keep in mind that South Chicago, where he is from, is a very heavy stronghold for Nation of Islam. You cannot win a political position of any kind in South Chicago without the thousands and thousands of individuals who are headed up by Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. Now, I want to show you something. I want to stop there and say, now, if you had been raised in an Islamic school and had Islamic stepfather and grandparents, and you had college friends who were Muslim, there's no way you can tell me you can't be influenced by the fact that they don't like the Jews. They don't like Israel. They don't think the Jews have a right to the land. And you hear this from the time you're a child to your teens through college, which are the time periods anybody will tell you that are the most significant in the life of a child. So consider that, and let's go from there forward in time. This is something that I observed during the time of the election, and of course, in election cycles, you must be very careful what you say. And I didn't know what to do with it, to be honest with you. I thought, I really think there's something to this. Islam has 70 signs of the last days. Many are in the Hadith. Some are the sayings and the actions of Muhammad. The sun rising seems to come into play from time to time. And Muslims around the world who know Islamic prophecy, this is a very important prediction to them. I'm going to read it to you. The hour will not come. Now remember, when Muslims talk about the hour, it's the last days. The hour will not come until the sun rises from the west. When the people see it, then those who are on earth will believe. But that is the time when belief will not profit a soul which did not believe before the time. Now, I did an Islamic commentary to try to find out, different scholars, what do they think the sun means in this prediction? One prediction, or one commentary said, the sun rising in the west and not the east is a prediction that that's what will happen. It will actually come up from the west in the morning instead of the east. Now, I read that and I thought, now, wait a minute, whoever gave that commentary has to understand everybody's dead at that point. If the sun ever comes up in the west instead of the east, the earth has shifted, everything's gone backwards, we're all dead, and that's not biblical. Come on, we're going to rule 1,000 years on earth that it still exists. So number two, the second interpretation was the sun or the light of Islam, the truth of Islam as they would say, will shine in the western nations and be received well. That's a common prediction. Number three, third prediction is the sun is a messenger, a person, a leader who will come out of the western nations and not only be positive toward Islam, but help promote Islam and protect and defend Islam, and eventually many will be converted to it. Louis Farrakhan believed the third one. I saw him preach on television in Pensacola, Florida, and I decided I just wanted to see the whole speech. He is a very charismatic individual. There's no question about that. And he can preach. I mean, he really can. He can speak and he can preach. I tell you where he got that from. He got that from hanging around Christians when he was a kid. You understand what I'm saying? It's like these singers that can sing. A lot of them started out in church. Well, he's preaching and I'm listening, and he's promoting, of course, Islam, but he makes a statement at the end. He talks about the sun will rise in the west. Now, he tried to paint himself as the messenger who was that sun, and kind of like, if people will listen to me, follow me, we're going to have this happen. However, in the 1974 Savior's Day address, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, quote, "You are witnessing the setting of one sun and the rising of another." And that was in 1974. Louis Farrakhan made this statement. I have the exact words as he made it. He was preaching to a group of young people prior to the election, and he was talking about his friend Obama. He said, quote, "You are the instrument that God is going to use to bring about universal change. And that is why Barack has captured the youth, and he has involved young people in a political process that they didn't care anything about. That's a sign. When the Messiah speaks, the youth will hear, and the Messiah is absolutely speaking." Now, why would they, and he later came back and said, no, I'm talking about this, no, I'm talking about that, but the speech in the context pretty much says it all. Why did he say that? Well, I was curious about something, and let me just read this before we show it to you. This was during the campaign. On Friday, June the 20th, a new seal debuted on Obama's podium Friday. Using iconography instead of the U.S. presidential seal. In other words, it was a replacement of the U.S. presidential seal. The blue background, the eagle clutching the arrows on the left, the olive branch on the right, but the symbolism is different. Instead of the Latin e pluribus unum, out of many one, Obama's version reads verso possumus, rough Latin for yes, we can. Instead of the seal of the President of the United States, Obama's website address is listed. Obama's eagle is wearing an O campaign logo with a sun rising, representing hope. The seal that you see on many people's bumper stickers, the seal that you see is the sun rising. This seal, I tried to trace back where it was made. It's my understanding it was made in Chicago. It also is my understanding from people in, political positions that there were several key Muslims working for the campaign. Now, I'm going to say something to you. Honestly, from a total political perspective, that's a genius idea. Let me explain to you why. Because if I'm a Muslim anywhere in the world, whether I'm Nation of Islam or Middle Eastern or Indonesian, and I come to understand that the last letter of his name is in the shape of an O, which is similar to the sun shape, of course, an O, circle, and he puts a sun in the middle with a new road coming across it, I would immediately say, wow, the sun is rising in the west. Now again, most Americans, they don't care. They say it's just a symbol. You're reading too much into it, but you must understand the power of symbolism. If I were to show you a swastika and walk around with a flag, you would be repulsed and want to throw me out of here. Symbolism is significant. It really is. You may say it's not, but it is. So I saw that, and I knew the prophecy of the sun rising, but you can't say a lot about it during that time. And I think that it could be, and I'm going to say could be, a cryptic type of message to the Islamic world that I will stand with you. You have someone who is going to stand with you and stand behind you and not be negative or create wars in your countries. What became interesting is another seal suddenly appeared in 2010. The new logo for the missile system in the United States. A government emblem. The new Missile Defense Agency logo is very similar, oddly enough, to the Obama campaign logo. You have what almost looks like an O with the same three stripes, instead of going downward, now going upward. Now, their job is to test missiles that defend the United States and its allies. But what is interesting is it doesn't really look like a sun. It almost looks like a crescent. Well, that's odd, because the crescent is the emblem of Turkey, where he made a great speech, including a speech about Islam. And also, that crescent is the universal emblem of Islam. The crescent is on top of every mosque. And I also think it's interesting when you understand that the moon is connected to the crescent. And in the Bible, you have a great war in heaven, Revelation chapter 12, and you also have the symbols of the sun and the moon there used in the symbolism of the Bible. Now, I can't say whether that be a conspiracy, because I told you the other day I don't believe a lot in conspiracy. I believe in cover-ups, and I also believe that there are things that people know they're doing for ulterior reasons, maybe cryptic reasons, to be read a certain way, and I'm only saying this could be one of them. To show you how the Islamic world feels about our president, June of 2009, in a visit to Cairo, they made a special plaque in honoring the president, which simply says, Obama, the new king, Tutankhamun, which is the long name for King Tut. And they see him as the new king of the world. It's also interesting, I don't know if you saw this, but they had made skirts, they had made ceramics that says, Obaman Kamon, which refers back to this great young king that one time was a pharaoh, but was a leader in the country of Egypt. Now, when Obama visited the pyramids, I'll let you look this up because this is interesting. He saw a pyramid, in the pyramids, a carving of one of the great leaders of Egypt. By the way, the leader of Egypt that made a speech that he was going to initiate change in Egypt. And it looks exactly like him. And the commentator even picked it up on the video. It looks like me. The ears, the cut on the chin. It really is quite fascinating, to say the least. Now, let's go forward in time. And actually, we're going forward and we're going backward. We're kind of doing what the book of Revelation does. I was in heaven, I was in earth, I was back in heaven. And so let's go into another direction. We're talking about symbolism here and the significance of symbolism in prophecy. When President Obama accepted his nomination, most nominations are made indoors for security purposes. Two men have made their speeches outside. John F. Kennedy, who made it outdoors, and Barack Obama, who decided to choose the Denver Stadium where the Denver Broncos play their football games to make his acceptance speech. Many people did not know this till it was pointed out that the name Barack was the name of Muhammad's horse, the white stallion that Muhammad rode on. Barack, by the way, oddly enough, in the Hebrew form can be blessed, because Baruch is blessed or blessing, and Barak is a form of the word blessed. In Islam, however, when you mention Barak, it's lightning, because that alludes to the horse that Muhammad rode on. Hussein, Barak Hussein. What is the significance of the name Hussein? Hussein bin Ali traced his descendancy to Fatima, the daughter of Muhammad that Muhammad loved dearly. He was the third imam in the Shia branch of the Islamic religion, considered to be one of the 14 infallible imams of the Shia religion. Hussein was killed in a battle in Karbala, Iraq in 680 AD and was one of the last actual descendants of Muhammad. So therefore, when you name a child Hussein, you always are connecting it to the Shia branch of Islam, to this particular man who is still honored to this day by the Shias in Iraq. The white horse. What is the significance of the white horse in prophecy? Revelation 6:2, I saw and behold a white horse, and he that sat upon him had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. Most scholars will tell you that white horse rider is the antichrist who comes in peace, the first part of the tribulation period, making treaties, riding on a white horse. One of the first things I learned in the 1990s when a girl from Iran began to share with me the belief of the Mahdi of Islam. She said it was our belief and is our belief in Iran and around the world that when the Mahdi arrives, you will know him because he will appear riding on a white horse. Well, she said that to me. I turned to the book of Revelation, and she and I together kind of, if I could use the expression, freaked out, because I said, here is what is interesting. I found out later Saddam Hussein would ride occasionally on a white horse. Muammar Gaddafi has a white horse. Ahmadinejad has a white horse. They all go and buy white Arabian stallions in case they are raised up by Allah to be the one who will be the awaited Mahdi to unite Islam and bring in that brand new Islamic empire. The white horse. Very powerful symbolism in Islam. Very powerful symbolism for the horse of Muhammad named Barak. At the Denver Stadium, wow. At the Denver Stadium, when President Barack was giving his acceptance speech, there happened to be the mascot of the Denver Broncos carved, actually not carved, but a statue right above him the entire time he was speaking. Do we know where that is? Which happens to be a white Arabian stallion named Thunder. Symbolism. Symbolism. The Mahdi comes on a white horse. The man who, at the end of days, Revelation 6, comes on a white horse. A white stallion Muhammad rode on. A white stallion named Barak. Barak making a speech with a white stallion above his head. Let me just say something to you. That may be total, complete coincidence, but if I were a Muslim and I saw the seal with the sun rising, and I saw a horse over top of a man's head who doesn't just have a name that's Islamic, but has Muslims in his entire family, I would say to myself, woo, we finally got rid of those cowboys in the West. And now we're going to have somebody that's going to maybe bring peace and initiate some justice for us in the Islamic world. Remember, it's about symbolism. A message to the outside world can be said without saying anything. The point is this. It's to paint the idea that there's a messianic figure, and they use many times symbolism to do that. Now, I'll show you something else real quick. I don't want to make a big issue out of this, but this is significant. During the campaign, he refused to wear an American flag. When asked, how come you don't wear an American pin like the other candidates, he said, I quote, I decided I won't wear that pin on my chest. Instead, I'm going to try to tell the American people what I believe and make this country great, and hopefully that will be a testimony to my patriotism. Of course, after his ratings started dropping, he put on an American pin. His idea was, now listen, he didn't really want to offend anybody outside of the United States. That's like a preacher saying, I'm not going to preach the truth to you because I may offend some of you. The truth is what sets you free. Notice this. When the national anthem, now this was not the Pledge of Allegiance, that was what was reported on the internet, that was incorrect. But the national anthem, oh, say, can you see? Every candidate on the platform did what all Americans do in a sports stadium, put their hand over their heart in honoring the soldiers and the people who have passed away. Picture was snapped, would not put his hand over his heart. Very, very unusual. Now, things like that to me, I could say, hey, maybe he wasn't thinking. He may have had something on his mind. So I can always give anybody the benefit of the doubt. But then you keep coming up with the information and you say to yourself, okay, is this being done on purpose? Is this being done on accident? Is this just a coincidence? We report, you decide. You know what I'm saying? I do remember this. I do remember that during the campaign, when people simply called him by his full name, Barack Hussein Obama, the CNN and MSNBC went into a rage. And they said these people are Islamophobic, using his middle name. And he literally would not use his middle name or emphasize his middle name during the entire campaign. Interestingly enough, on his interview with Arabic television, in his interview and speeches in Turkey, and his appearance in Egypt, he is proudly introduced as Barack Hussein Obama. Now, doesn't want to use it much in America, but uses it in the Islamic world. From a political perspective, honestly, great idea. Brings the crowd in with you. Makes you feel like you're with them and they're with you. Politically, great idea. But I don't like double standards. If you're going to say your name their way, use it as president. Don't be hesitant to use it in America, because there's nothing wrong with the man's name. Barack is in the Bible, folks. There was a man named Barack that was there's nothing wrong with his name, but it makes you begin to think, why won't you do it here? Well, you'll do it there. And the answer would be because of 9/11 and the war on terror, there would be people that would be a little bit cringe when we're fighting a Saddam Hussein, or we have people in Pakistan with that name who want us dead. It just does create... Can I give you the comparison? Oh, I better not do this. Somebody's going to really criticize me if I say this. But never mind. No, I'm really going to leave that alone. That's not wise. Number two, statements that he made in Turkey. He made the statement, we are not at war with Islam, nor ever will be. Now, while that's true, we are at war with Islamic fanatics. Folks, everybody were fighting in Pakistan, and everybody were fighting in Iran, and the guy that tried to blow up the car in New York, they were not Baptist. Nor were they Presbyterian, nor were they Catholic, nor were they Buddhist, and nor were they Hindu. In case Washington has not noticed, let me put them on notice. Everybody we're killing in these countries that want us dead are Islamic fanatics. I mean, just the other day, Eric Holder, advisor to the president, is sitting there, and a politician simply asked him a question. Do you believe that the car bomber in New York was an Islamic fanatic? He wouldn't answer. He got asked 8 times or 9 times in a different way about, do you think some of these individuals are being trained by Islam? The guy would not say the word Islamic fanatic. Do you know why? Can I tell you why? Because when he became president of the United States, one of the things he demanded them to do was to cease using the word in all departments of government, Islamic fanatic. When that man in Texas killed our troops, I have never been more angry in my life that our president did not get up and call it for what it was. We are at war with Islamic fanaticism. No, we're not at war with Muslims. There are a lot of Muslims, honestly, I know them in Israel, that are peaceful people. I'm their friend. We eat together and laugh together. A simple-minded Muslim who keeps his religion in a simple fashion is a very friendly person. I'm not kidding you. They're funny. They're nice. They'll invite you to their house. What would you like? I mean, that's how they're supposed to be. But there is a fanatical element. One woman who used to work in the Justice Department told me 200 million, approximately, fanatics that would love death to America and death to those in the United States. Now, that's a war, folks. A million's big enough, but 200 million around the world? And so I'm disturbed when our troops get killed and then the White House takes all the papers to themselves, won't let the Senate and the House do an investigation. Come on now, talk to me. Talk to me, somebody. I was also disturbed, and I'm going to, Larry, change some things up, and you're going to have to just watch me on this. But I was also greatly disturbed, and I mean this sincerely. The day of prayer last year came, and he didn't have a dinner with any ministers. He didn't have a time to even, he just signed a piece of paper and went on. And I was in Louisville, Kentucky, and here's what I said. Folks, time is going to tell this year where the heart of our leader is when the Islamic month of Ramadan rolls around. For if our leader invites Muslims to the White House for a dinner, makes a speech about Ramadan or the Quran, and allows any form of prayer for Muslims, we will know he's Christian in head, but Islamic in heart. Now, I'm not trying to be negative here, But I'm saying, now when that happened, and here came Ramadan, here came the Imams, here came a speech in which 3 times he used Holy Quran. Not Quran, Holy Quran, and even puts the little Quran in it. Okay? Now, let me teach you something from the Middle East. When I address a Muslim, I never use the word holy as a Christian in front of Quran. I say the Quran and the Hadith, and they understand that. Only a Muslim making a speech to Muslims or a Muslim to another Muslim would ever insert the word Holy Quran. See, these are just little clues that the average American either don't care about or not going to pick up. And I told you the other day, and this is not just something we're making up, there's about 2 to 3 individuals that said they have heard this, that in the White House 3 times a day when he's there, and it's a basic schedule, that he will go for a few moments into a room, his wife goes into another room, and who knows what they're doing in there 3 times a day. And I told you the other day that in Turkey, they passed a new law in Turkey that if you are either sick or traveling, you don't have to do the 5 times a day prayer. You can do the 3. And I just think it's interesting. Maybe there's no link. I'm honest, but maybe there's no link. But I think it's interesting. He went to Turkey and made a speech over there. And then that's when you start seeing this type of thing develop. My point is, and we go back again real quick, and now I'm skipping over some things fast, Larry, but we go back over even the situation with the feet that were placed upon the desk while he is addressing Benjamin Netanyahu, and the White House photographer, you know, took the picture, and it was released in Israel. In fact, let me give you what an Israeli paper said about the photograph of the bottom of the president's feet while he is on the phone talking to Benjamin Netanyahu. Israeli newscasters Tuesday night interpreted a photo taken Monday in the Oval Office of President Obama talking on the phone with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as an insult to Israel. It was reported on Israeli TV, Channel 1, that Netanyahu was told by an American official in Jerusalem, quote, "We are going to change the world. Please don't interfere." So in other words, our administration sent word to them, and that was a CBS News that actually reported on that statement. Now, that's another issue. A third issue is hate crimes. I always thought it was the gay community that was pushing the hate crimes legislation in America. According to the Catholic Network, a woman who studied the hate crimes legislation said that the originator of it was CAIR, C-A-I-R, which is the Organization for Islamic American Relations. And they wanted to pass this hate law so that preachers, teachers, statements, and writers could not say anything negative about Islam. Harry Reid said, "Hate crimes will give a small minority, including Muslims, preferential rights and protections. The law will enforce at least triple penalties against anyone who commits a hate crime against a Muslim. Anyone whose speech influences a violent crime will also be punished." Attorney General Holder said they can go back 7 years to see if you have made any Islamophobic statements that have incited violence against Muslims. Now, that's a statement from Harry Reid. Harry Reid. Hey, folks, look at this. How come if you offend a Muslim, you get punished 3 times more, but you can blaspheme the name of Jesus on public television and nothing happens to you? Where's that hate crime at? Washington, April the 7th, 2010. President Barack Obama's advisors plan to remove such terms as Islamic radicalism from a document outlining, and they will, from all document outlining, and they will use the new version to emphasize that the U.S. does not view Muslim nations through the lens of terrorism. The shift away from terrorism has been building for a year since Obama went to Cairo and promised a new beginning between America and the Islamic world. Something, folks, is going on here. Now, who are the real apocalyptics? Who are the real people looking for prophecy to be fulfilled? Christians, Jews, and Muslims. I'm going to share something with you here just as a point of interest. There was a report that was reported on Forbes magazine online. They later pulled it. And the report was allegedly Amir Taheri wrote 10 books on Iran. It's 132 volumes. And this is what the report read on Forbes. Is Obama the promised warrior coming to help the hidden imam of the Shia Muslims? A pro-government website, this is Islamic website in Iran, published a Shia text from the 17th century And it comes from Bahar Anar, Under Oceans of Light, by Mullah Majlisi, 132 volumes that form the basis of the modern Shia Islam. Let me stop and tell you, Sunnis totally don't accept this. They only accept a hadith that's old. And most Muslims would not accept this if they're Sunni, because they only want the ones that are directed from Muhammad. But the Shias, remember, they take sermons, they take speeches from their imams, and they take them as inspired. Here's what it says. According to tradition, Imam Ali ibn Ali Talib, Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law, prophesied at the end of times and before the return of the Mahdi, the ultimate savior would come. A tall black man would assume the reins of a government in the West, commanding the strongest army on earth. The new ruler in the West will carry a clear sign from the third Imam, whose name was Hussein ibn Ali. It concludes the Shiites should have no doubt at that point that he is among us. Now, they've tried to debunk this, but others have pointed out that Sunnis would want it debunked because they're not going to accept it. The book is so many volumes. Only one of the 132 volumes has been interpreted. It's now in the Farsi language. But if the government did report this, then could it be, and I'm only asking, could it be why Iran is building a nuclear arsenal, has biological and chemical weapons, and we're doing nothing about it? Maybe. I cannot answer it for certain, but is it perhaps possible that that is what is taking place? Now, my greatest concern as a Christian and as a minister of the gospel is simply this. My greatest concern is, in order to try to appease 1.4 billion people that are a part of his family background, in order to appease the friends that helped finance him, which were many Muslims, as I told you, former college friends raising funds, that he will be willing to compromise with the greatest democracy that we have in the Middle East and the greatest friend we have, which is the nation of Israel. It's already been proven that he has shunned Netanyahu, he has mistreated the Israelis, he has made statements to them in private that they will lose their support if they don't follow the peace plan that he's initiating and he is attempting to lay out. Now, how does this fit in with the possibility of America? Number one, Christians who know their Bible know that the Bible says, I'll bless those that bless you, curse those that curse you, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, they shall prosper that love thee. We must continue to pray as Christians for the peace of Jerusalem and for Israel. Number two, please understand that prophetically America has to go on a decline as an empire. We cannot remain the main empire and these 10 kings come to power. It's not going to happen. Please get that in your heart and mind. Doesn't mean God's done with us. Honey, as long as the Christians are here, God ain't finished with anything. As long as the church is here, God's not finished. Number three, remember that there are individuals through history that are simply puppets for a new world order. And I believe someone is writing all those speeches that he makes every day. Someone is behind the entire system. He is the spokesman, the voice, and the voice piece for this. And I believe with all of my heart that what we're seeing here is somehow not a fulfillment of prophecy per se, but it is, in my mind, something happening that is supposed to happen. You've heard me preach it and say, it is God that raises up leaders, it is God that brings down leaders. I've said it publicly, I get criticized for saying it. It's the will of the Lord for him to be in the position that he is in now, and he is going to fulfill